to Christine Kendall to begin our February 2021 program series of Cooking in Cast Iron with Christine Kendall. So Chris, it is all yours. Go ahead and take it away.
Okay. Well, thank you. And thanks everyone for being on with us today. A little bit of background about this series and how I started doing a cooking in cast iron class to begin with. So I'm frequently asked by our local library system to do different classes, and they have all these fun things that they want to do. So a few years ago, I was contacted by one of my libraries, and they said, hey, can you come and do something about cooking and cast iron? And so always up for a good research and putting together a good program. I said, sure, I can put together something for cooking and cast iron. And this was the beginning of that. And so I actually did some of this by researching my own investment in some cast iron cookware and kind of finding out more. So I was providing not just my basis from having used it growing up and at home, but actually providing some research-based information and some real information about things related to cooking and cast iron. So I would not say that I am like the state or national expert in this particular topic. I'm sure that there are others who know a lot more about cooking in cast iron, but I hope that this will be fun for you to come along with me today, and we can talk through some things and hopefully gives you some insight for some of those basics and little nuances with cast iron cookware. So here we go. Topics today, we're going to be talking about selecting seasoning, care, some tips and tricks, some troubleshooting, and if we have time, I have a few pre-recorded cooking demos. With it being a lunch and learn, we're kind of see where the topics take us and how much time we have here at the end. So if this works, I do have a poll question so I can get to know my folks who are on the call as well. So let me launch my poll. Okay, and so hopefully you're now viewing two questions. Does everybody have those up? Can you see them? Okay, so, oh, no, this is not the right poll. No, no, wrong poll. That's the end of the poll. No.
Try again.
Try it again. Okay, where did my poll questions go? Oh, here. Okay, let's try this one. Okay, launching the poll. So what is your experience with cast iron? This looks better. Okay. So what's a meal if it isn't made in cast iron? I like it. I love it. I wish I used it more. It's in the cupboard, just waiting to burst forth. And that's like a skillet, right? Okay. So those are our options for where we are with our cast iron cookware. So a few of you get to vote on here. Kate and Emily, I think you get to vote too. So even though you're co-hosting with me, I think you can jump on and do some voting too. Okay, so looks like the majority of us have that cast iron waiting to burst forth from the cupboard. So wanting to learn a little bit more about cooking here. Okay, let's see. Now I should have one more. Maybe my other poll isn't on there. Okay, so my other poll was supposed to be asking you about what of these topics most interest you. So the topics that I have planned for today, so I can kind of hone my oh, did it show up?
I just did it for you, Chris.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Emily. This is why it's nice to have colleagues on the call who are in the background getting things to work. Much appreciated. So yes, what kind of things? And you can vote for more than one if you would. So of that, looks like most of us are wanting to select the cookware and cleaning and then some cooking basics. So, okay, so I can end that poll. And so there's our results on that. And so I'll stop that share and we will head on to getting into our topic. So it sounds like the first topic, selecting, is one that is piquing a lot of interest. So some considerations, some of the things to think about are what do you really want to make in that cookware? What's your heat source? And how many are you cooking for? What's your price range? Do you want to spend time seasoning it? Just cleanability, how important is that? And so we're going to take a look at each of those considerations in turn. So the first one would be, what do you want to make? Because really, although a lot of times folks think about cast iron being that skillet, there's a lot of variety in the different cookware that's now available. It's really quite impressive, actually. And so that skillet, I find to be one of the tools that I use all the time. So we're cooking in cast iron probably at least 3 times a week. We're pulling out the skillet and that we're doing some cast iron cooking. So it's really become something that in our family we really love. And every time I make something in cast iron, my husband's like, see how much better it tastes? See, I told you. And so it can be a piece of sausage and he'll be like, see, that just tasted better in cast iron. And so, so we're using it, more and more and really enjoying. So I would say, in our family, that skillet is really the thing that gets used a lot. But, think about the Dutch oven. It's like a big pot, so if you're doing soups and stews and you're doing roasts and all of those kind of things, wow, there's a lot of versatility in that Dutch oven. If you're wanting to do things that'll drain off, so if you want to do those things like hamburgers and bacon and sausage and those kind of things, those grill plates, like I have on the right side of the screen, that's actually a piece of cast iron that we have as well. And we use that a good bit. We use it very frequently to make hamburgers and, again, sausage and those kind of things, and really enjoy that as well. So it kind of depends what you're wanting to make. You can even get cast iron woks. So again, a lot of variability there. The next consideration is your heat source. And it's really lovely how versatile cast iron can actually be. So you can use it with electric or gas or even glass top stovetops. So all of those work with that cast iron cookware. You can use it on an induction burner. So that's, if you're needing a more portable, or if you have an induction, cooktop, then you don't need to shy away from cast iron. You can still use that cast iron cookware. It's great in the oven. And this is something that I've been exploring a lot more, is doing some of those oven cooking with the cast iron. So finishing things off in the oven, or even, preparing and cooking it in the oven. And so that's, it's a wonderful, versatile pan that way. I mean, it's really quite lovely because, when I was using my other skillets, my other skillets had, plastic parts on them, or, the coatings that didn't really allow you to put it into the oven. And so you were stuck on the stovetop, right? Well, with your cast iron, it transitions very easily to the oven. Again, like to finish something off, or even just to cook it from the beginning. So you can brown it there in your cast iron on the stove, and then you can put it into the oven, to finish it off. So again, just really great versatility there. You can use your cast iron on a grill, like I have in that middle picture there. A campfire. So that's actually a camp Dutch oven is what that thing is called there. And that's great for if you're doing cookouts and things on with camping and whatnot. So the only place you really cannot use or should not use your cast iron is in the microwave. So do not put it in the microwave. Selecting your cast iron, we also want to think about our burner size. So this actually legit is a picture of my favorite cast iron skillet. So this is one that I own and that I really enjoy. And I see we did have a question come up in the chat. So while we're here, let me address that. Is there a specific silicone handle or similar you would recommend for using in the oven? So actually, I should have taken a picture of it. I'm so sorry. I have these 2 little silicone pieces that fit, like I said, this is my skillet, okay? And so I have these 2 little silicone pieces that fit right over those handles. And then it's just perfect for putting it in and out of the oven. I do actually take them off because they just kind of like clip on and then I can pull them off really easy. And so I don't leave them in the oven, but it's really easy then, to get it in and out of the oven with those little silicone handles that I have. So yeah, so if it's like an oven safe kind of mitt, or those, like I said, those little pieces that you can put on, you can leave those on there if you'd like. But like I said, I do take mine off when I put it in there. So I hope I addressed your question, Amy. If you have more question about that, but I know there's really a lot of nice oven safe kind of products that can just stay right on it when you have things in the oven. So, okay. So as I was saying, this is my favorite pan. And unfortunately, getting a little bit ahead of myself in the presentation here, but you'll notice if you look at the bottom of my favorite pan, do you see how it has some rough spots on it? Okay, well, that's because I have a very old stove. Kate was joking with me about my Harvest Gold stove the other day. And so it's original to the house, built in the 60s. And so, but hey, it still works. So we're using it. And so I don't have big burners. So my biggest burner is like 8 inches. So if you think about, okay, how much of my pan is not having burner contact, okay? That's what's causing this in this particular instance, where the center of my pan is getting so much hotter than the outlying parts of my pan. And so that causes that roughness to it. So if you start to see that, that can be a cause of what's going on with that particular situation. So I actually do have a large induction burner as well. And so that is a much better fit. So really, when we're looking at the burner size, that might be a limiting factor in the size of pan that you want to get, because you really should have no more than 1 inch of that pan bigger than the burner. Okay, so if your burner is an 8-inch burner, then we're looking at a 10-inch pan would be the largest you'd want to get. Does that make sense? So hopefully, I see some heads nodding, so that's good. So in my situation here, I have a good 5 inches of being bigger than my burner, so about 2.5 inches all the way around that it's bigger. So, so if you have any questions about that or would like some clarification, go ahead and you can put some things in the chat, but we do want to try and match. And generally speaking, if you get an 8 to 10 inch cast iron skillet, those are really highly versatile, very popular. So those are probably the 2 most popular sizes, is the 8 or the 10 inch cast iron skillet. When we're looking at how many we're cooking for, well, that's a good question to consider. And, they do come in a variety of sizes. So if you notice that littlest one that I have, these are also my cast iron. So the littlest one that I have there, that one is about a 5 inch there in the bottom. Okay. And the biggest one that I have there, it's close to like a 10 inch. That's the diameter across there. So, depending again on how many you're cooking for, what you're cooking, if I'm just doing a single egg for myself, well, I probably just want to pull out that little pan, whereas if I'm cooking up a meal for my family, I'm going to pull out the bigger pan. So that's something to consider in how many you're consistently cooking for and what kinds of cooking you're doing. Here's a fun fact. So if you have older cast iron cookware, you will notice either at the handle or on the bottom of the pan, you will notice that it has a number. And frequently people think that that number is indicating the pan size. And it really is not an indication completely of the pan size. So this is not a 3-inch pan. This is a 5.5 inch pan. This is actually one that we inherited from my husband's grandma. And this was one of her favorite pans. Unfortunately, it is a little rusty because it's, been a while since it's had some care. And so we're going to have to do some work on this one. But a lovely piece of cast iron and a nice little pan for doing eggs or, something small in it. But again, that 3 is indicating on old stoves. Okay, so the old stoves that had the plates, like the old wood stoves, okay, so they had plates that sit in. And so what they would do was they would make the pan, so that number 3 actually matches the number 3 plate on those old wood stoves. So then you would know you could take that plate out, you could set your number 3 pan in that hole on your wood stove and have a nice seal, and you would not have a lot of heat lost in using that pan on your wood stove. So that's where that comes from. Also on the bottom, you'll sometimes see some letters and some additional numbers. So for example, like a 3B. Well, depending on the foundry, so there were a number of different foundries that made cast iron cookware, especially when we had the big wood stoves and everything. So you can find a lot of this vintage cast iron cookware. And so what that code is indicating is actually the foundry's pattern. So if you have a 3B, it would be pattern B of that foundry's line. So it'd be the 5.5 inch skillet that was pattern B. And so foundries might have up to 4 or 5 patterns. So anyways, there's a little bit of history on that. And so if you go and you're looking for some things at garage sales or thrift shops or whatever, you'll be like, oh, I know what those numbers mean. And you can figure that out. So, okay, fun aside there. So in selecting our cast iron options, we have essentially 3 different kinds of cast iron cookware that we can get. So I don't know if you can see my mouse moving here, but this is the bare cast iron. So notice how it doesn't have that shiny glaze looking to it. Okay, so this is just bare. We would have to season this one. This is a pre-seasoned and this is enameled. So let's look at these a little more. So the traditional bare cast iron does require some seasoning, and it requires some extra care up front. So we have to do some things to make sure we get that good seasoning coat on there so we don't have rust and other things creeping up, so we get it nice and smooth, okay? So once we have it well seasoned, we got easy care, they're less expensive, and it's a lasting investment, okay? So, if that's, if the seasoning is not a barrier for you, that's a really good option. The next one is the pre-seasoned cast iron, and we're seeing a lot more of this on the market where they're pre-seasoned. They're ready to use after that initial cleaning. So when you bring it home, you're going to clean it in soapy water, okay? And you're going to clean it in soapy water before you season it too. So your bare cookware, you clean that in soapy water. And you might notice that it's a little bit rough. That commercial pre-seasoning, the pre-seasoning process kind of leaves like a rough coat on it. But you do not need to pre-season or to season that again. Okay, now if you want to, hey, go for it, but it is not necessary to do any further seasoning on it. And then the third one is becoming really quite popular, but these are expensive, much more expensive at this time, is the enameled cast iron. So has anybody seen these, the enameled cast iron at all? So there are a number of companies that are coming out with these, and they're very nice because they do have a porcelain enamel glaze, and it's adhered to that cast iron surface. So notice how this pan looks much smoother. It almost looks like it has a nonstick, finish on it. That's not a nonstick finish. So that's like that enameled glaze that's over the cast iron. Okay. The modern glazes, they are safe. There's no risk of leaching lead or anything like that, but it allows for much more thorough cleaning. Okay, so with this, we don't have as much concern about what we're putting on it. It's not going to rust. We don't have to season it. So this, again, is a really good option, but yet you get a lot of the benefits that cast iron offers in cooking. So not many said that they wanted to learn much about seasoning. We're going to just kind of briefly go through this, and hopefully that discussion of selecting your pan gave you some things to think about and got you pointed in the right direction for that. Seasoning is when we get that layer of lubricated residue on the surface of cast iron that flavors food while creating a nonstick surface. And so if you have to season or not, well, that's going to depend on a few factors. If you're purchasing new, look at the label. Okay, so the label will tell you if it's seasoned or if you need to season it. But if you're inheriting, depending on who you're inheriting to and what kind of care has been taken of those, you might be in luck. Like I am waiting to inherit my aunt's cast iron because that has 40 years of excellent seasoning, So she let me borrow the pot or her one of her skillets for a program that I did. And she's like, this pot, I got to think you were born. And I was like, oh, well, hey, and it is smooth. It's lovely. Although I was really worried I was going to do something to her skillet. So anyways, if you're purchasing it from a garage sale, you're going to have to do some assessment. So you're going to have to take a look at it. Does it have rust? Does it have bumpiness? Is the seasoning coat intact? If it's not, well, we're going to work that off and then we can start over with that seasoning process. And what does that seasoning process look like? Well, I'm going to share with you the Lodge recommended method simply because I feel like it's a credible method. And I found a lot of different websites telling you a lot of different things out there. And so I feel like this one's a good, credible method. If you want to, try something else, hey, go for it. But what they recommend is that you rinse and dry your cast iron completely. And then you're going to apply a very thin, even coat of either melted solid vegetable oil or shortening or cooking oil of your choice on the inside and the outside. Now, America's Test Kitchen, they do a lot of different research on, factors affecting cooking and whatnot. And so they actually did some really interesting work looking at cast iron cookware. And what they found was that they used all of these different oils and looking at, what provided the best seasoning coat. And so, and fats and whatnot. And so what they found was that the more unsaturated the oil, the more readily it oxidized and polymerized the coating. So what does that mean in layman's terms? It means we get a better seasoning coat. Okay. So the oils that they found to be most effective, canola, sunflower, soybean, corn, and flaxseed oil. And actually the flaxseed oil was the one that got the kudos for being the best one. So just, I guess, something to keep in mind as you're going forth. I use canola. So that's just, what I've used on mine. So it's point of preference. But so then the next thing you're going to do, place aluminum foil or cookie sheet, okay, on your bottom rack. Set your oven for 350 to 400. You're going to place that cookware upside down. So as you can see in the picture that I have there. And then you're going to bake it for at least an hour. Turn off your oven at that point, let it cool down, and then remove it from the oven. Excuse me. So sorry, I'm getting all choked up about my cast iron, right? Oh, okay. So with your seasoning after your initial seasoning process, every time you use it, you're going to get a little more seasoning on it. Seasoning is going to stay good and well maintained as long as you're properly caring. So let's switch over to some things about caring for your cast iron. So you do want to wash your cast iron by hand, and it's recommended to use like a nylon bristle brush. Or if you really have stuck on bits of things, a nylon scraper. So I have like one of those little square nylon scrapers. That's what I use to clean mine. And then also another product that's been found to be very effective is this thing. So this is like a chain scraper. I don't know if anybody has seen these. And and I thought, well, that looks like that'd be kind of rough, on my cast iron. Like, do I really want to do that? So here again, I went back to America's Test Kitchen and some of the things that they're looking at, and this is actually one of the products that they are recommending as well. So now you don't really want to like scrub, like you're not, scraping hard with this stuff. Just lightly scraping around to get off those stuck bits. Now, for sticky situations, if you have lots of stuff stuck on, you can just put a little bit of water and let it simmer for about a minute. I mean, it's not exact, okay? It's not like, oh my gosh, if I went a minute and 6 seconds, like my cookware is going to be destroyed forever. Nothing like that. So, but it's just roundabouts a minute. Let that cool down and then go back to using that scraper to get off those stuck on pieces. Dry it promptly. Okay, now usually in food safety, we say air dry, and all this. No, do not air dry your cast iron. You need to dry it very promptly. Something lint-free, ideally. So if you have a lint-free cloth or paper towels, that's what you want to use to get that dried. And then you want to rub it with a very light layer of cooking oil, preferably when the cookware is still kind of warm. So the picture that I pulled here, this is exactly what I do. I just take a little piece of my paper towel, and I put some oil on it, like canola oil, and I just wipe it around, get a nice even coating. Now notice how it's not like oil sitting in the skillet. It's not, drenched or anything like that. So you just want it really nice and an even light coating. And then you want to hang it or store it somewhere where it's going to stay dry. Okay. So again, you're not going to keep it in that drying rack or anything like that where it could come into contact with some water. You want to get it put away or hang it or whatnot so it does stay dry. What about soap? Well, soap isn't necessary, but mild detergent is not going to harm your seasoning. Okay, so this is one of those myths that we hear with cast iron, like, oh, never use soap. Okay, well, don't use a degreaser. Okay, you don't want to use anything like that. You don't want to use anything harsh. You don't want to use any metal scouring pads, and never put your cast iron in the dishwasher. But if you, if you need to use a little bit of soap to clean things up, yeah, we're not going to let it sit. Okay, it's like soap and lather and wash and go. Okay, so you're not letting that soap sit in there and really go to work. Okay, but in truth, yeah, my food safety is my other big love, of things. And so when we started cooking so much in cast iron, my husband's like, "Are you okay with this? You're not soaping things up. You're not, letting it air dry. You're not putting it in the dishwasher to destroy every organism that might be on there, and and so really, you're going to heat it, you're heating your cast iron, you preheat, and so that's why it's okay. Okay, a few tips and tricks. Thinking about some cooking oil considerations. So you do want to consider availability and affordability, effectiveness, but most importantly, the thing we want to consider is smoke point. So, for example, I had a friend share with me that, her son was trying to be fairly healthy, and so he decided he was going to put some avocado oil into his cast iron skillet, and he very quickly had a flash fire. So, yeah, fire in the kitchen, because just pour the avocado oil in. Okay, so that is not, when we're looking at oils, we want to make sure that we have some that have a higher smoke point. So definitely a consideration. Melted shortening and canola oil are generally ones that are recommended. Olive oil can be used as well. Like a lot of dishes you'll see calling for olive oil because it's becoming very popular because of some heart healthy things, associated there. However, keep in mind that olive oil does have a lower smoke point. Okay, so that's something you have to be aware of if you're going to use that. And actually, one of the cooking demos that I have, it does call for using olive oil, and you have to watch when it comes to a smoke, like you have to be getting your stuff in the skillet. Okay, so lard used to be recommended, particularly while seasoning. We found that really that's not as good of a choice because for one thing, it has a tendency to go rancid. Okay, so any of our animal fats, so lard or tallow, lanolin and your lamb and all of those things, you have to be kind of careful with those that you don't have them going rancid on you. So, fun fact, cast iron is actually a poor conductor of heat. So this is defying another one of those myths because everybody says, oh my gosh, cast iron, like even heating. Okay, no. So actually they, America's Test Kitchen here again did some really fun and interesting research about the evenness of various cooking. So they weren't specifically looking at cast iron, they were looking at stainless steel and a number of different cookware products. And so they did this test where they put a layer of flour. And I don't know if it was only flour in, but it was, flour was the primary thing that was in there. And so they put like an even layer of flour in the bottom of all of their different cookware and the same thickness in all of the different cookware. And then they put them on the same burner. Okay. And, so all of the parameters were the same for all of the cookware, essentially, is, what was going on here. And so then, what happens to flour if it's in, a pot and that pot gets hot? It turns brown, right? So they looked at, the brown spots then in all of the different cookware. And so what they found was that with cast iron, if you have your cast iron and you put it on your burner on your stove and you just heat it up right there, it heats unevenly. So they had a lot of brown spots in the cast iron cookware. So it was not like an even browning like they saw in other cookware. It was a spot here and a spot over here and a spot here. So some ways that we can get around that. Okay. And so that's a thing to be aware of. And so one of the things we can do is to preheat our pan in the oven, which it works really well actually. So you preheat it in the oven. I usually do mine at about 400, okay, 450. Some say 500, and I don't know. To me, that just seems like a little unnecessary. So, I about 450. Put it in the oven, and so I'll have it in there for a few minutes before I'm getting ready. So I'll be chopping up stuff and getting things ready with my recipe while I have that preheating. And so then that gives you a really nice strong sear. Like, so then, the pan is ready. And so then when you put, your meat in there, particularly really nice browning of the meat and good cooking qualities there, because it's all nice and evenly distribution, of heat. Now, if you're going to have it on your stovetop, now it depends somewhat too on the kind of stovetop you have. Okay, so like you're going to have more evenness with a gas stove than you would have with like an electric coil stove. Okay, so you got to kind of keep that in mind too. But heating it on the stovetop on a well-matched burner for 3 to 5 minutes before you put anything in the pan can help you as well with evening that out. Okay, so it's just a little bit of pre-planning. But I don't know if anybody else was like surprised to see that, but when I was, reading through things and I found that little bit of research, I was like, oh, well, hey, that's like against everything I've pretty much ever heard about cast iron. So, okay, so a few little what ifs here. So what if food sticks to the surface? Well, you may need to repeat some steps for seasoning. If you have food consistently sticking. What if I notice dull gray color or rust? Okay, so you may need to re-season that cookware depending on how bad it is, okay? There's also an instance here where, okay, here's the bumpy pan. And so we might need to do some spot re-seasoning. And I didn't include this actually specifically in a slide, but I'll tell you a little bit about how to do this. So if you have, like as we see in this one, or even in this previous picture here with this rust, I might be able to just, rather than taking my whole pan down with some steel wool or, something to scare that off, I might be able to just take, a little bit of this spot here, okay? And then with that spot re-seasoning, you put it on your stovetop on a burner, And then you're going to put a nice even coating of oil in the pan. Take your paper towel, run that around. Okay. And so you're just going to consistently do that for a period of time until that it levels up, it smooths out. So if you can do that, I know that's a little time consuming, as opposed to just, hey, put it in the oven, so it's whichever you prefer, but that prevents you from having to like totally go back to square one, take that pan down and you start that reseasoning again. So what if you notice dark residue on your paper towel or cloth when you're drying it? Well, do not panic, do not fear. It's perfectly safe. So what happens is when you have foods that are acidic or alkaline, so for example, if I was to put like a balsamic vinegar, or if I was to put some tomatoes, okay, which some places you'll see that they'll say like, never put those in your, cast iron. You can, you don't want them to sit, okay? Because when they sit, then that's longer that's wearing down that seasoning. But, it's, what happens is when you have that acidic or that alkaline food in there, then it does react with the oil and the seasoning coat, okay? And so then that causes that black coloring that you'll notice if you have a paper towel or when you're drying it off or whatnot, okay? So again, just if you have it a little bit, yeah, not a big deal. You don't want to leave stuff sitting in your cast iron. What if it's sticky? Okay, well, if it's sticky, then that's a sign that you have extra oil buildup. So maybe, you're doing that seasoning thing, or, you're coating it with oil after you wash it and you're getting a little too much oil. Okay. So then you'll end up with like a sticky or like a gumminess to it, because that oil, it's not fully, doing that polymer coat that we talked about, how like the oxidation polymerization that we talked about. Okay, so it's not fully converting to a seasoning coat. So what you can do simply to take care of that is kind of like you're doing seasoning, just put it upside down in your oven, 400 for about an hour, let it cool, and that should take care of that stickiness. Okay, so we're at 12:42. I do have a few cooking demos that I had recorded ahead of time. And they're actually about 10 minutes each. We can kind of zoom through some of them, though, if you want me to fast forward or whatnot. And it does have my Harvest Gold stovetop. So you get to see that lovely Harvest Gold. So here's pork chops. Well, hopefully, Emily might have to help me with this a little bit. But hopefully we can get this to work. And here we go. Hi, I'm Chris Kendall, a family and consumer sciences extension educator with Ohio State University Extension in Tuscarawas County. And thank you for joining me for this edition of Cooking with Cast Iron. Today, we're going to be making a boneless pork chop with a balsamic peach topping for it. Absolutely fabulous. Before we get started, I'm going to go ahead over and wash my hands, and then we'll come back and talk about some of the ingredients. Now that we have nice clean hands, let's talk about some of the ingredients that we're going to need for our recipe today. Again, we're going to be making a pork chop with a balsamic and peach topping on it. And so for the pork chops, I have about 2 pounds of pork chops here, and I do have boneless pork chop, but that's your preference. You would not need to have that many pork chops if you're just cooking for 1 or 2. Also, if you wanted to leave the bone in, you could certainly do that. I have some extra virgin olive oil that we're going to be using in the skillet, cast iron skillet with the pork chops. It's going to have a balsamic glaze, and to make that balsamic glaze, we're going to need 1/2 cup of our balsamic vinegar, 1 tablespoon of honey, and then also about a tablespoon of fresh thyme. And so this is fresh from the herb garden. Excited to be using it here tonight. You could also use oregano if you'd rather use oregano instead of using that fresh thyme, which we have some fresh oregano too. I like the way that the thyme blends with the pork, so I'm going to be using that here tonight instead of using the oregano, but again, personal preference on that. So I'm gonna cook the pork chops, I'm gonna put the balsamic glaze on it there at the end, and then also peaches. So I have 3 peaches. I have a little bit smaller peaches, so I'm gonna use 3, 2 to 3 is great with this recipe. I'm gonna put it into the oven at the end to get a nice glaze on the balsamic sauce and the peaches, and then when I pull that out, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put on a little bit of fresh basil, again from the herb garden, some feta cheese, and I'm using a reduced fat feta cheese this evening, and then also some crushed red pepper. So that's going to complete the ingredients there for our recipe. Okay, so I have my cast iron skillet heating here on the stove. I'm going to put a little bit of olive oil in here, just a smidgy bit. The recipe says 2 tablespoons, but I'm just going to put it in a nice light coating. I always say till it looks right, and so that looks about right to me, to get a nice coating there. And I can feel that it's getting warm. I'm going to go ahead and put my pork chops in. Again, these are boneless. If you wanted to have bone in, you certainly could. I'm going to go ahead and put my pork chops in here to get started. You can trim down some of the fat on those pork chops as well. So while those are cooking, I'm going to go ahead over and I'm going to start on that balsamic glaze. You can hear those pork chops cooking in the background, so I'm going to talk a little bit louder so you can hear me okay. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get a half a cup of my balsamic vinegar. I'm going to hunker down here so I'm right at level and make sure that I have the correct amount of balsamic vinegar. You don't want to measure from the top. You always want to hunker down so that you're right at that level and able to see the lines on your liquid measuring cup. Now I'm going to add in a tablespoon of honey. And honey is a nice natural sweetener. It also adds some thickness to this recipe. So really excellent there. I'm just going to stir that in. And then for my thyme. So I do have an herb stripper here. This is called actually an herb zipper. And the way that this works is I'm just going to pull the very top little piece off of that herb. I'm going to select the size that's appropriate, and then I'm going to zip that right through. So pulls all of the leaves off of the stem, and I have my herbs ready to go. So once I get the rest of those zipped, I'll go ahead and put that into my balsamic vinegar and honey, and that'll be all set for that balsamic glaze. It's been about 3 minutes, and here I'm going to go ahead and flip these pork chops. I got a nice browning on them. And there we go. Gonna let them cook on that side for about 3 more minutes, and then we're gonna work on peaches while that's happening. So while the pork chops are cooking on side 2, I'm gonna go ahead and cut my peaches. And I leave the skins on. That's where the fiber is. And so I think it's always important to make sure that we have good nutritious foods. And so we're gonna leave those skins on. And I'm just gonna make some thin peach slices. There we go. And we'll same for this one. So we're all set then with those peaches. I'll do the other 2, and we'll take another look at that pork. Okay, so back over here with the pork chops, I'm going to check and make sure that they are properly cooked to an internal temperature of 145 degrees Fahrenheit. So I have my alcohol swab, clean my thermometer, and just going to check these. And yes, here we are. We're at 149. Gonna check a few of them just to make sure. That one's at 154. Okay, well, looks like on the far side of the pan, they're a little cooler. So we're not quite to temperature with this one over here. Let's do a quick check of this one. Get that one to temp. So I just got to get that one up to temp here. I'm gonna move it around in my skillet a little bit, see if I can't get it to a warmer location. And the last few minutes that these are cooking in the pan, I will check that one again to make sure I get it up to temp, but while these are cooking here, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm going to pour my balsamic glaze over my pork chops. Gonna make a little bit of sound and a little bit of steam here momentarily. I'm also going to put a little bit of salt and pepper. So this is my pepper grinder. So a little bit of coarse grained pepper here on my pork chops. And a little bit of salt as well, my salt grinder. And then I'm going to go ahead and add in my peaches. Just on top and some in the glaze. This is a beautiful dish, in addition to being quite yummy. Okay, don't want that to cook down too much. I'm going to check the temperature on that last pork chop that we were really close with. Oh, there we go. Moving it helped. Got that up to 150. And so my last step is that I did preheat my oven and I have it set to broil. I'm going to put this in on that broiler for about 5 minutes just to finish it off. That's optional. If you don't have a pan that would be suitable to put in for the broiling, then you could skip this step. But I tell you, it makes a really nice touch on that finishing of those peaches there. Okay, just pulled this out of the oven and I think it looks fantastic. To finish it off, I'm going to put a little bit of that reduced fat crumbled feta on here. And I tell you the combination of the feta with that balsamic, it's a lovely combination of flavors. The sweetness of the peaches is just really fantastic. So there's the feta on there. And again, that was about a half a cup of the feta that I put on there. Then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put some basil on here as well. Use my herb snips and just kind of spread that around to get some basil on here. That fresh from the garden basil. I know you can't smell this, but I tell you it smells absolutely wonderful. And then lastly, I'm going to put on a little bit of the crushed red pepper flakes just to sprinkle on, and it just adds again like another layer of that flavor, nice complex flavors that we have going on here. It's absolutely wonderful. So there we go. If you like it a little hotter, you could even put more red pepper flakes on than that, but looking delightful. Can't wait to enjoy this, and I hope that you do too. Oops. Okay, so we're going to be short on time if we watch this one too, but if you want to do the pork chop recipe, this is how you can make lamb chops. Lamb chops without them actually tasting like lamb chops. This is a recipe to do it. So my daughter loves lambs and she actually raises lambs, and so she and my husband love to eat lamb, and I can't say that I'm as big of a fan, and so I'm constantly looking for recipes that I can have lamb but not have it taste exactly like lamb. But here is the link for that, so if you want to copy that down and check out that lamb chop video as well. These will be posted to our county website, so tuscarawas.osu.edu. So they're going to be posted there very soon with recipes too. So I know it's kind of hard to get all of the recipe stuff when you're watching those. And then we also have a third one. It's a pasta recipe that we're working on too. So hopefully you can take a look at those and get some inspiration for cooking some fun things in your cast iron. Okay. So there, we're going to skip past that. So what questions do you have? And okay, so what causes lard and other animal fats to go rancid? So actually it's oxidation of the fats causes that rancidity, and to prevent it from happening, I mean, you can freeze some of your fats like you would freeze butter, but with if you leave lard or any fat, really. I mean, even if you have peanuts, if you leave them too long in the cupboard, then there is an oxidation that naturally occurs with that fat and causes it to then, it's called going rancid. So it gets a really off odor. So if you've ever opened like a thing of peanut butter or a bag of peanuts, or if you've ever opened like something that's an animal fat and you've been like, woo, it's really very pungent. So, but that's what's happening there. So, and I know Emily's, her background's food science, so I don't know if she has anything she wants to add into that, factors or how to prevent that from happening as well. So if you do, Emily, you're welcome to jump in on that one too. But any other questions that anybody has? Okay. Oh, well, thank you, Lee. I appreciate that. Oh, enjoyed having you all on here too. So you've had good questions and very attentive. So thank you.
As we are wrapping up, please go ahead and if you have questions, throw them up in the, I hate saying that, put them up in the chat. I need to like reword my statements there. Put them up in the chat, please. But I will go ahead and pop up 2 quick polls. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording and get